not all stories are told in daylight. Here we tell you the stories they warn you not to repeat, and the ones they pray aren't true. Tonight's story comes to us from the frozen wilderness of northern Ontario, where winter is more than a season. It's a predator. This is the chilling account of one man's encounter with the Wendigo, the insatiable hunger of Anishinaabe legend. If you're alone while listening, maybe light a fire, draw the curtains, and remember the old rules. Don't whistle after dark. Don't say its name in the winter. And never answer a voice that sounds too familiar. This is what winter keeps. I wasn't sure I should send this in. These kinds of stories sound like lies, or like the ones people tell at Halloween to see who shivers first. But it happened to me last winter, and it's lived inside me since, heavy as the snowdrifts that pile up against the cabin door when you're 2 days from town. Maybe telling it will make it lighter, or maybe I'm just passing it on, the way people always have up here, so somebody else remembers the rules. I grew up north of Lake Superior, in a little rail town outside Armstrong station. That's a place most folks only know about because bush planes and the VIA rail stop there before heading deeper into the country. Past Armstrong you get to the Wabakimi Provincial Park, which is bigger than some countries and emptier than all of them put together. That's the bush that raised me. Black spruce, jack pine, tamarack lowlands, lakes folded on top of lakes, and long winters that test what you're made of. The people who taught me to move through that country didn't do it with romance, they did it with the rules. My dad and my uncle both said them so often they turned into stories. Don't whistle after dark. Don't leave food hanging where it can talk to the wind. And most of all, don't say certain names in the winter. You don't give the hunger a way in. Among the Anishinaabe elders, the word was Wendigo. Some wouldn't say it at all. They touched 2 fingers to the lips, then to a door frame. A gesture like closing a lock. I learned to do it too, even when I didn't know what it meant. Later, teachers in town called them Algonquian legends, like they were something pressed flat in a textbook. But the stories weren't about morals, they were about survival. They were about the kind of winter hunger that could make a man dangerous to himself and everyone around him, and what the bush does to that hunger if it gets loose. I grew up knowing the Wendigo wasn't some antlered forest god like movies draw. It was a hunger that wore a person out from the inside, a hunger that never ends. I tell you all this, so you know I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't thrill-seeking, I went north because I needed money. A buddy from college hooked me up with a contract, snowshoe into a research cabin on the edges of a lake in Wabakimi, swap trail camera cards for a wildlife study, check the solar batteries, and make sure the place hadn't been busted by storms or bears. It paid more than it should have, and I figured a week alone with boreal silence would be good medicine. It took me 2 days to get in. The plough had cut the highway clean, but the bush road off the shoulder was drifted shut. I parked near the Armstrong rail shop, lashed my gear on a toboggan, and started down the old line with snowshoes squealing under me. The sky was low and grey like wet wool. I made camp under leaning black spruce the first night, the kind that crowd together like they're telling secrets. When you cut a hole in that snow to make a fire, the pitch in the spruce needles flare up sharp and sweet, and you almost forget the air can break your breath in half if you take it too fast. The second day, the wind came hard from the north, braiding snow off the lake so it looked like long white hair. No fresh wolf tracks, no moose signs, just rabbit prints that ended too suddenly in an open patch, as if the rabbit had never finished the jump. Above me, a feather drifted down. It felt wrong, and I carried that wrongness in my stomach until I reached the cabin. It sat on a low ridge above a narrow lake, built square and plain, tin chimney bent from years of storms. Inside smelt like pine planks and mice, which was as good as a handshake. Somebody had even left kindling by the iron stove. A laminated sheet on the wall gave the rules. Conserve fuel, pack out trash, sweep, lock it tight. Beside it was a map of the trail camera loop that the grad students had set up, 3 miles along the lake, a spur up to a salt lick, and a ridge cam that someone had circled with a smiley face and a note, "Bring extra card." The cabin's rule also said not to store food inside. You never invite smells that can talk to the wind. So I kept the tins and the cash chained outside. That night, I sat on the porch steps while the last light bled out of the spruces. Winter dark here isn't like city dark. City dark has reflections. Wabakimi dark is a door slammed shut. I walked the perimeter with my headlamp off, counting my steps the way Dad taught me. 19 to the boulder that holds sun heat, 27 to the lightning-scarred pine, 12 to the woodpile, 9 to the outhouse. You say the numbers under your breath so the bush knows you're paying attention. Halfway round I caught a copper smell in the wind, like a coin on your tongue. Then it was gone. The first 2 days were ordinary. I hauled troll cam cards, cursed up my gloves and marked down tracks. Red fox, bobcat, a young bull moose with antlers still sheathed. On the ridge camera I found prints I couldn't place, too long in the heel, too deep at the toe. Like something heavy was walking wrong. I told myself it was sunmelt, the kind of lies you have to tell to stay practical. Back at the cabin I warmed a can of stew, swept the floor and told myself I was fine. The bush teaches you to trust chores more than feelings. On the third night, something called out on the lake. It started low, like wind in a culvert, but it stretched too long. Like something remembering how to make a sound. The second time, I swear it bent towards my name. Not the short version people use in town, but my full name. The way my dad says it when he's not joking. I banked the fire, killed the lantern, and sat in the dark. The sound stopped, but the silence that followed felt aimed, like something had decided to listen. By morning, there were marks around the woodpile, not paw prints, not boots, just deep wounds in the snow where weight pressed through. I put my gloved hand into one and sank to the wrist. That copper smell came again, faint, almost behind my teeth. I should have left, but the weather channel on the little radio said the highway south was closed under drifts. Leaving meant burning more calories than I could afford, so I stayed. I split wood until my arms shook, walked the perimeter again, recited my numbers. That night, when the wind pushed at the cabin walls, a voice called from the porch. It was my father's voice. "Hey," it said, muffled but clear. "Hey, open up. You left the woodpile a mess." The latch twitched. I knew where my dad was, 300 kilometers south in Thunder Bay. But knowing doesn't matter when your body hears family at your door in the middle of the storm. A voice sighed, too close to a laugh. "Always with the bar," it said, and then softer, the word I didn't want to hear. "Hungry." Something leaned against the door, gentle as a tired man resting his head. The latch lifted another quarter inch, then the window went dark, as if something taller than the frame was peering in, learning my shape. I didn't sleep much after that. When dawn finally seeped in, I half expected to see the door blown open. It wasn't. The snow on the porch had changed. The top crust was shattered in a wide arc, as though something too tall for the roof had leaned down against it. The prints weren't neat, more like collapsed funnels pressed deep and then blurred by weight. I wanted to convince myself it was a wind scour, but when I put my boot in one, it swallowed me to the knee. I forced myself through the day on ritual alone, stoked the stove, logged weather, reviewed trail camera cards from yesterday. The first dozen clips were normal. Wolves nose to tail on the ridge, a lynx slipping between the trees. Then, came one from the salt-lit camera that stiffened my spine. At first it looked like nothing, just a blown spray of snowflakes close to the lens. But as I leaned closer, I caught the silhouette in the far tree line. A figure hunched, too thin for a man, arms dangling longer than they should. It didn't move like anything alive. It swayed and stilled, and the clip cut out. I shut the laptop so fast the cup rattled beside it. That evening, I rationed food, not because I was running short. There were still tins stacked neat in the pantry, but because I felt watched. It seemed stupid to advertise what I had. The elders always said the Wendigo was hunger itself, that it smelled, want like smoke. I didn't want it sniffing my supper. The nights came quicker. Storm clouds sealed the sky so low, I could have believed I was underground. The dark pressed on windows like another wall. On the third night, I heard something laugh. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even a hole, just a scrap of sound caught on the edge of the wind. But it had shape, a human shape. The laugh of someone remembering a joke halfway through. My stomach turned to water. I sat at the table with my lamp dimmed, chewing on the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. That was when the scratching began. Not claws, at least not the way an animal scratches. This was deliberate. 3 strokes, slow, on the back wall with my bunk pressed against it. Then silence. And 3 more, lower down, as if it wanted me to hear it move. I whispered the number of the perimeter like they were prayers. 19 to the boulder, 27 to the lightning scarred pine, 12 to the woodpile, 9 to the outhouse. Saying them settled my pulse, but even as the scratches drifted along the wall and stopped beneath the window, the glass went black. I couldn't see anything. The lamp was too dim and the storm was swallowing what little light lived in the sky. But the absence of reflection told me something tall was blocking the pain. I sat there until my jaw hurt from clenching. Finally, I banked the stove, lay down fully dressed, and pulled the sleeping bag over my head like a child. I hated missing it, but it's true. When morning came, I found the window room crusted with frost, but only on the inside, as though a mouth had breathed long against it. The next days blurred chores, fear, sleeplessness. Every time I stepped outside to split wood or fetch water from the lake, I felt watched. Sometimes the copper smell came back, sometimes thin as a penny rolled between teeth. Other times it was worse, a sweetness, almost rotting, like something dead left under the snow too long. I told myself to be logical. Fatigue causes paranoia. Sound carries strange across frozen lakes. Memory turns warning into shapes. But then I opened the food cache. I'd locked it the night before. In the morning, the chain was unhooked, lying neat on the snow as though placed by hand. Inside, 2 tins were missing. Not dragged off, removed. The snow around the cache was disturbed, but not with paw prints, no claws, no pads, just those deep, jointed depressions, pressed too far apart for any man. That night, I heard my uncle's voice outside. "Boy," it said, the way he used to call me when I was late for chores. "Boy, open up. Got work for you." The laugh came again, softer, like it had enjoyed the sound of itself. The latch lifted. I jammed the bar down so hard the wood split around the screws. My breath steamed ragged against the cold air creeping in at the edges. The thing sighed. Then silence. Safe to say I didn't sleep that night. The next day, once again, I considered leaving. Packed a sled load, strapped on the snowshoes, and even stepped outside to the tree line. The silence out there was wrong. No birds, no squirrels, no moose sign, just the forest, almost holding its breath. The air carried that copper tang again, sharp enough to sting. I thought of the long miles back to Armstrong, the drifts deeper than a man's chest, and realised the bush wouldn't let me out that way. Not now. Not with something pacing me. So I stayed. I told myself it was maths. Better odds with walls than without. That night, the cabin shook. Not from wind, I know the difference. This was weight, shifting deliberately, pressing against the roof beams until dust sifted down like flour. The stovepipe rattled. The lantern flame guttered. Something scraped slowly across the boards, as if tasting each one. Then, a sound that almost undid me. The creak of the porch, step by step, until it stopped right outside the door. It didn't speak that time. Not with a voice. Instead, it tapped. Once, twice. The rhythm of a knuckle. Then silence. I don't know how long I sat there with the axe across my knees, whispering my perimeter numbers like a madman. But at some point the tapping stopped, and the silence that followed was worse. Because silence meant it had learned patience. I used to think the worst sounds in the bush was silence, the sudden kind, when the jays stop scolding and the squirrels freeze. And you know something bigger is moving. I was wrong. The worst sound is a breath you didn't take. It came in the middle of the night, a long, slow exhale against the wall of the bunk where my head rested. The frosty-rimmed window glowed faint with moonlight, but the rest of the cabin was dark. I lay perfectly still. Another breath came, drawn out, ragged, and hungry. I snapped the lantern on. Nothing in the room, but the breath didn't stop. It was outside, just beyond the logs, moving along the wall towards the door. The latch shifted. This time, I didn't bar it. The iron was already bent, screws pulling loose from the wood. I just sat, axe across my knees, heartbeats so loud I thought it might answer for me. The door bowed inwards once, twice. Then the Wendigo spoke. Not with my father's voice, not with my uncle's. This time, it was my own. Let me in, it whispered, perfect in tone, but wrong in rhythm, like a record played half a beat too slow. I'm cold. I'm starving. The copper smell flooded the cabin, sharp enough to make me gag. My teeth ached with it. I don't remember standing. I remember the door giving way, snow gusting in, and a shape for the frame. Taller than the lintel, arms too long, joints bent wrong. Not antlers, not beast, just hunger stretched into the form of a person until the form broke. Its mouth cracked when it smiled, skin splitting at the corners like bark in frost. It stepped inside. I swung the axe. The first blow glanced off its shoulder with a sound like hitting wet wood. The second struck. The Wendigo barely flinched. It leaned close, and the smell of rotten iron poured over me until my eyes watered. Its voice rasped in my own tones again. Hungry. I wrenched the axe free and stumbled back. The stove glowed red behind me. Without thinking, I kicked the door of it open, sending sparks and coals across the floor. The creature recoiled, not in fear exactly, but as if fire was an insult it hadn't accounted for. It hissed, high, thin, animal. I grabbed the kettle, boiling hard from hours on the stove, and threw it. Steam burst between us. For a moment, I saw its face clearly. Not monstrous, not human, but somewhere in between. The eyes were pits, dry and black, skin so tight over bone it looked ready to tear. And then, as if the night swallowed it back, it was gone. The cabin was empty. The coals hissed on the floorboards and axe dripped with something dark that steamed in the cold. But the Wendigo was nowhere. I sat until dawn, axe in hand, smoke stinging my throat. When the sun finally pushed through, I packed. I didn't check the cams, I didn't sweep, I just lashed what I could to the sled and started south. The wind had scored the trail bare, but I pulled until my chest felt like it would split. For 2 days I didn't stop except to drink melted snow and chew hard biscuits. At night I didn't dare light a fire. On the third morning I saw the rail line. Relief hit me so hard I nearly dropped to my knees. The track glittered, empty, stretching east to Thunder Bay, west back to silence. I turned once just to look to north. On the far tree line, something stood, thin, too tall, arms hanging low, watching. I didn't wait to see it move. I hitched the sled and walked until my legs gave out on the ballast of the track. I told myself I'd never speak of it. But you can't keep silence forever. The old ones knew that. Silence is its own invitation. So I send this story to you, not for proof. Proof burns up like kindling in the face of things like this. But for memory. If you repeat it right. Don't say the name in the winter. Don't whistle after dark. And if a voice outside your cabin called you in the tone of someone you love, keep the door barred. Because once you answer, once you give it shape in your throat, it knows you. And hunger never forgets. That was what winter keeps. But hunger doesn't belong to one place or one winter. The next account comes from across the border in northern Minnesota. On the frozen roads of Cass Lake, a man who thought Wendigos were just stories, the kind you hear online, fall asleep to, and laugh about in the morning. He found out otherwise. This is the Lake Windigo Hall. I should probably start with a confession. I'm one of those people who falls asleep to scary story videos. The long ones, where somebody's voice goes low and steady like they're sitting across from you in the dark. Wendigos, skinwalkers, shadow people, I've heard them all. Creepy enough to keep the lights on, but that was the fun of it. I never believed them, not really. They were just stories, background noise to carry me off. That was until last January, when I ended up in a winter hall up near Cass Lake in Minnesota. Most folks know Cass Lake as fishing country. Summer cabins, boat rentals, bait shops, but locals know it's different in winter. It's Ojibwe land, the Leech Lake Reservation, out with the snowbills deeper than roofs. And the roads vanish under ice, the woods press close. And right in the middle of Cass Lake there's an island, Star Island. And in the middle of that island, another lake, a small, round one with a kind of name that feels like a dare. Lake Windigo. The first time I heard it, I laughed. Windigo Lake, it sounded like a tourist gimmick. I even pulled it up on YouTube, typed in Wendigo stories Minnesota, and sure enough, there were hours of narrations. Hunters gone missing, shadows in the pines, voices calling across the snow. And I watched a couple, smirking like I always did, half creeped out, half entertained. A week later, I was standing on that very ice. I was there because my buddy Travis had a cousin in logging. Seasonal work, hauling drums of fuel and supplies across the frozen road cut across Cass Lake. It wasn't glamorous, but it was money, and I needed money bad. There were 3 of us on that run. Me, Travis, and a guy named Kyle. Travis I knew. We'd gone to school together. Loud, cocky, always making jokes to cover nerves. Kyle was quieter. Older, with a kind of eyes that had seen too many winters. The type of guy who said little, but when he did, it landed heavy. The road was just a trail scraped over the ice, snow packed down by ploughs. On either side, white stretched forever. The kind of landscape that erases distance and makes you feel like you're walking inside a sheet of paper. We moved slow, sleds creaking behind us, breath frosting our beards. By sundown, the wind was already coming down, snow riding it sideways. We were supposed to make it back to the highway by nightfall. Instead, the radio spat static. Blizzard warnings. Whiteout conditions. Highway 2 shut down. Our only option was to hole up in an old logging bunkhouse on the north side of Star Island. A leftover shack from a cruise decades gone. I'd seen pictures of the places in history books, drafty rectangles of pine, 4 bunks, a stove, nothing more. And that's exactly what it was. No charm, no cabin in the woods fantasy, just a roof against a storm. We got the stove going, stacked our gear, and unrolled our bags. Travis grinned through his beard, cracking open a can of chili like it was a campout. "Guess we'll find out if those Wendigo stories are real, huh?" he said. I laughed with him. Carl didn't. He just cut him a look, the kind that he's heard enough. Then he went back to feeding the fire. By midnight, the storm had the shack rattling in its seams. The wind howled like it had a throat. We played cards on the floor, the lantern light jittering, the stove popping sap. Outside there was nothing but black and the sound of snow trying to chew the walls apart. We crashed late. I don't know how long I slept, but sometime in the dark I woke to a sound that wasn't the wind. Laughter. Not inside. Out on the lake. It was faint, carried under the storm, but it had shape. A man's laugh, short and sharp, like someone choking back a joke. I propped up on my elbow, listening. Travis snored across the room. Kyle shifted in his bag, muttering something. Then he went still. The laugh came again. Closer this time. And then right at the wall beside me, as clear as a mouth pressed to the boards. "Hey, you left the door unlatched." The latch rattled. I froze, my throat locked. The glow of the stove painted the door in faint orange. And for a moment I saw the shadow of something tall just beyond it, bent wrong, shoulders too high. Then silence. I lay there till dawn, staring at the boards, ears full of my own blood. Morning came, grey and brittle. We stepped out to check the sleds, and that's when I saw the prints. They weren't ours, too long in the heel, too deep in the toe, barefooted looked like, but pressed into the ice like whoever made them weighed 100 pounds more than they should. Travis laughed, nervous this time. "Snow clap's weird," he said, too loud, too fast. Kyle crouched by the tracks, gloved hand resting in one. His knuckles went white around the fabric. He didn't say anything, he just shook his head once. Back at the shack I noticed the food. Cans missing. The wrappers, though, had been peeled and set neatly aside. Not chewed, not scattered like an animal would leave them. Just placed like someone had eaten dinner and cleaned up after themselves. I thought maybe Travis had gotten hungry in the night. He swore he hadn't. Carl just stared at the cans and went outside to split more wood. At night, the laughter came back. Circling. Sometimes far, sometimes near. Sometimes it sounded like Travis. Once, it sounded like Kyle. At one point, I swear, it used my own voice. Soft and close to the window. "Hey, you awake?" We barred the door. Kyle sat with an axe across his knees. Travis tried to joke, but his voice shook and nobody laughed. We didn't sleep. By the third day, the storm had swallowed the world. The bunkhouse was half buried, the radio was dead, and snow squealed against the roof like nails. Kyle volunteered to take the latrine bucket out. He stepped out into the white, lantern light bobbing, shadow stretching. Minutes passed. No return. We called. Walked out 20 feet into the storm, lanterns up. His boot prints went that far and no further. They ended in the middle of the ice like he'd stepped off into nothing. Travis swore, eyes wild. He said Kyle had bailed, run for the mainland. I wanted to believe him, but the silence out there felt like it was listening. We went back inside, barred the door again, didn't talk. That night, the tapping began. Slow, steady. Tap, tap, tap. It moved along the walls. Then a voice spoke above the window. Not Travis's, not Kyle's. Mine. "Cold in there, isn't it?" the glass went black. Something leaned close. Breath fogged the pain from the inside. Travis broke. He screamed at it, shoved the bar aside, and yanked the door open. The wind howled in, snow blasting across the floor. For a second I saw his shape out there, lanterns swinging. Then another voice answered in the dark. Kyle's voice. High, panicked, calling Travis's name. Travis ran towards it. His light vanished. His scream cut off like a door slamming. Then there was nothing. I don't remember much after that. I remember the boards creaking under weight that shouldn't have been there. I remember a copper taste in my mouth, sharp and bloody. I remember eyes at the window. Pits so black, they weren't eyes at all. I remember clutching the axe, whispering to myself over and over like a prayer. You don't believe, you don't believe, you don't believe. At some point the dark pulled back. Dawn. Pale and empty. The bunkhouse was silent. Both cots were empty. Only mine remained. I didn't bother with gear. I just shoved the food into a sack, grabbed the axe and staggered into the storm. The wind had dropped, but the silence was worse. No birds, no creak of the trees, nothing but my boots crunching on snow. I kept the lake at my back and walked. Hours blurred, my watch froze, my water was ice by noon. Once I thought I saw a lantern ahead, but when I stumbled closer, it was only the sun catching frost. That night I dug into a drift and tried to wait it out. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought I could hear Kyle's laugh under the snow. By the second morning, my legs shook under me. I ditched the sack, the axe, everything but the clothes on my body. The only thought left was find the road. When I finally stumbled onto a packed trail, relief nearly buckled me. The track stretched east towards Highway 2, and somewhere beyond that, people. By dusk I saw it, the lights of Cass Lake Town glowing faint through the snow, the low hum of a plough working the highway. I'd made it. I was safe, but something in me wanted to turn around. Against every shred of sense, everything in my soul telling me not to do it. I turned. The lake was behind me, white and empty. No figures, no tracks. Just my own. But on the wind, faint and low, my own voice drifted back. It's cold out here, isn't it? That was the Lake Windigo Hall. 2 stories, 2 winters, 2 encounters with the same hunger. Whether you believe them or not is up to you. But remember this. These aren't just tales for the internet or words to whisper around a campfire. Out there in the deep cold, something is always listening. So, don't whistle after dark. Don't say its name in winter. And if a voice calls to you from outside, make sure the door stays shut.